Hey there, Squirrel Army. I want to share with you one of my own personal commander decks and do a deck tech here on Katilda, Dawnhart Prime. This is a +1/+1 counters based commander deck tech. You can join the Squirrel Army by subscribing. Alright, so if you don't know what my little friend Katilda here does, she's a 2-drop 1/1. She has protection from werewolves, which, I don't know, for the set, I guess it makes some amount of sense. But you can tap human creatures for mana, as long as it's in their color identity, essentially. So a white creature can tap for white, and a green creature can tap for green. Selesnya creature can tap for Selesnya, or either one of those colors, essentially. Then you can pay 6 mana and tap her to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So we certainly do want a few humans in this list, as long as they help us out as well with some of our other points of our game plan. But we don't want to, again, focus too much on that piece of text. Certainly we do want humans, as I said, but it's not like we're a human tribal deck. We are a +1 counters deck, primarily with some humans that do synergize well or do stuff well with +1 counters or with getting into combat and getting into the aggro range so that we can actually protect our creatures from dying in combat or whatever, dying from wraths, etc., whatnot, those sorts of things. Or things that just do useful things for us, like draw cards or whatever, things like that. So, I'll find you my deck list and I'll show you through it. Alrighty, so now we're having a look at the list I've got here for myself. And we've got quite a price tag here, oh dear, but still it's one of those things that does happen. And as I say, with a lot of these decks, that I did put a whole bunch of really good dual lands and whatnot into this list. So again, you can find some other budget options for this list if you would like to put the price down just a bit. I think Savannah's probably one of the cards that's adding quite a bit of value to the list here. So yeah, there is that. So yeah, it's one of those things. But anyway, before I go too deep into discussing the list, I will say again that the deck list is in the description. So if you just want to check it out, copy and paste, or whatever you want to do with it, you can check it out in the description. So anyway, we'll get going along now. If you are here to see the chatter of the list here, so I'm not going to go through most of the sorceries that we've got here and whatnot. I've got a couple of ramp spells, a couple of wraths, and a couple other things, mostly Storm of Souls to recover things and whatnot. So I'm not really going to talk about them. Vivian's in here. She makes tokens, so that's really good. She helps us get card advantage, so that's really good. I don't ever use the tech down. I know there's some maybe things that you can do with the tech down to get some crazy things happening and whatnot, but I don't really care about that, so I've never really thought about it and never really used it. But it's mainly here to make the tokens and to give us that card advantage, which is nice. Again, I'm not really going to talk about the lands because, again, there's no real point because whatever budget you're going to have is kind of the lands that you're going to be able to put into this deck, whereas I have a fairly substantial budget and can afford some of these lands. I don't have the actual Savannah, I just have a proxy of it, but still, it's still a fair price either which way. But anyway, you can find yourself some decent lands. I won't talk about some of the more ramp or card advantage cards too much because they're just like ramp and card advantage, like Carpet of Flowers, Garrick's Uprising, Guardian Project, even Lurking Predators and Ranger class, Great Henge, and the Bestiary. They're sort of either card draw or ramp, because that's what they do. I'm not even going to talk about boots and greaves, because again, they're obvious why they're in here. They're to protect things. Cathar's Crusade. We do make a fair few tokens in this deck here and there, or I think I actually used to make a few tokens in this deck, but still, even saying that we don't make many tokens in this deck, besides like maybe Vivian or whatnot, it's still really good to give everything a +1/+1 counter that we have on our field when we play something. So that can really buff up our stuff really, really quickly. Especially in token decks, this goes insane, but still it's really good here. Hardened Scales, we get an additional counter. One of the things about our commander is it is 6 mana to get 1 counter. It is 1 counter on everything, but still 1 counter isn't that many, and adding an additional for 1 mana is basically doubling our token counter generation. So that's really well worth it. Summons, it changes our game state from having these just random 1/1s that really can't do a whole lot to having base 5/5 essentially flying angels. So that's really, really powerful and can make us win the game very easy. I won't really talk about many of the instants here for the most part, because they're all just decent removal spells, so we won't really go through that. Abzan Falconer, really great giving our stuff flying. We need evasion in this deck for our stuff with counters that's really big, eventually, to be able to punch into people. So we need that evasion, and flying is really good evasion. Org of Autumn just giving us some card advantage, so that's really useful. Beast Whisperer, card draw, card advantage, really useful. Hydra, much like Hardened Scales, more counters is good, and it puts more counters on our stuff. So when we put a counter on our stuff with it, we're effectively putting 2 counters on all of our stuff with it. So that's really powerful. Champion of Lambholt means our stuff gets less and less blockable. So again, we need to have that evasion to get in, hit people, because we're an aggro deck. Conclave Mentor, more counters again. The other effect of gaining life is just fine. Sometimes it'll come up, sometimes it won't. The Grafter, the more proliferate we have in this deck, the better, for the most part, because, and especially mass proliferate, is really good. Well, proliferates anything anyway, which is just so much more powerful than populate as well. So, but anyway, it's one of those things that I don't really care about the toxic. I explained this in a video that I did about this, that the toxic doesn't really matter. Getting 3 on somebody is nice to get that extra card draw and land play, but that's just gravy for the most part. We're really looking for the extra proliferate, so that's what it's here for. Deep Gnome, it's here to get us lands whenever an opponent land ramps, so that's well worth it for us. It's funny how this works if somebody else has a Deep Gnome Terramancer on the field. So basically what happens is, well, we got a land from a source that wasn't a regular land play, so our opponent gets to do the same thing. So then we see that they've done it, and then we can do it again. So we basically can get all of our planes out of our library if somebody else is playing a Deep Gnome Terramancer, and we might make a little bit of a deal with them to say, hey, you want you and me to get all of our planes out of our decks? Sure, why not? So that, we don't have to worry about getting our planes out of our decks or getting more planes in our hands, just those dud draws. Some people won't do it, but you can keep doing it as much as you please, basically, if 2 people have these on the field, which is really weird. But anyway, I thought I would just explain that because it's such a funny little thing. Defiler of Vigor, this is great whenever we cast something that is green, and I believe that most of our deck is green, which, yes, it is. that we get a counter on all of our stuff, so that is very well worth it. Destiny spinners here, so our stuff doesn't get countered. We have a lot of creatures and a fair few enchantments. We do have some artifacts and instant and sorceries, but that's okay. We mostly are creatures and enchantments, so that's where we're at. The Sentinel, here to draw us cards for when people don't pay. The Evolution Sage is here for more proliferate. Hydra, this is just one of the most insane cards in our deck. Doubles the counters on all of our stuff with counters, so that gets really silly really quickly. Kadama of the West Tree, land ramps us whenever a creature that has a counter on it deals combat damage to a player, so really useful. Lizelle, additional counters. Unicorn gives our stuff vigilance, protects our stuff. Miri protects our stuff when we attack and also protects us from being attacked too much, so that's a really useful effect. Mariel means people can't cast things on our turn, so that helps us do our things and whatnot without being delayed or interacted with too much. And makes tokens as well, which is just nice. It's not that amazing, but still it is nice. Both of the Odrics are here for their evasive capabilities. The Frostfang, nice to give our stuff Death Touch, especially when our stuff is so big. Like, we do kill everything really quickly, and when we do have Trample, we just, deal so much damage with our big death-touching stuff really quickly. And the card draw is just so good. The Ooze here for more counters shenanigans, so that's real useful. Pier, we can't fit Toothy in here because he's blue, but this guy's in here to give us extra counters on our stuff. So that's useful. Secure Builder, just ramp. Seaborn Muse is here because our commander does tap, and we do tap a lot of our stuff for mana and for the abilities that our commander has. So it's really useful in that regard to untap all of our stuff and keep doing that whole put counters on our stuff, untap, put counters on our stuff, untap style things. Shalai gives our stuff hexproof, which can be useful, very useful, and has the same ability as our commander, so we can easily get that off as well. It is actually easier than getting our commander off, but I think our commander's so good at being a mana dork and doing a whole bunch of other stuff that it's well worth it being our commander, and it's also so early on. The Sky Boon gives our stuff that attacks our opponents flying, and it also supports sixes us. So that's really useful. The Pathlighter protects our stuff when we're going into combat. Both the Familiars are here for ramp purposes. The Timeless Witness is here to return stuff from our graveyard when we've lost stuff, and we can also get it back with the Eternalize ability. I know the Eternalize ability is pretty darn expensive of a cost, but it's still well worth it in many circumstances, because when you have it in the graveyard and you just have nothing else, you basically pay any price to get one or two of your other cards back from your graveyard so you can rebuild. So yeah, it is definitely well worth it. Toski's more card draw. Vigor protects our stuff from dying in combat or from wraths and whatnot. And also buffs up our stuff with counters. So that's really, really useful. Vizier is here for more card advantage. And Vorinclex is here to go completely nuts with +1/+1 counters. It also slows our opponents from getting counters and whatnot. That is something to think about when you've got Proliferate and you might be proliferating someone's poison counters. They get half the number of counters. But then again, you're making the counters, so that's kind of a weird sort of synergy that kind of goes on there. Yeah, that's one of those things that you've got to think about. But anyway, that is the list here. You can let me know what you guys think of this list. Write your thoughts down there in the comments below. And I hope you've enjoyed and hope you will join us in the next one.